The mating ceremony had been everything Alara Thorne never imagined it would be. Standing beneath the ancient oak trees of Silverpine Valley, surrounded by the most powerful werewolf families in the Northern Territories, she had worn a dress the color of moonlight and carried wildflowers picked from the meadows she'd grown up running through. Her heart had pounded with nervous anticipation, not from fear, but from the overwhelming impossibility of what was happening. She, a common-born wolf from the Cedar Creek Pack, was about to be bound to Silas Vane, the legendary King Alpha, who had unified the fractured clans of the North through sheer will and unmatched strength. The aristocracy had whispered from the moment the fated mate bond had snapped into place 3 months prior. Alara had felt it during the summer council, a golden thread that had wrapped around her soul and pulled her gaze across a crowded hall to lock with eyes the color of storm clouds. Silas had felt it too. She'd seen the recognition flash across his face before he'd masked it with the cold composure he was famous for. The bond didn't ask permission or care about bloodlines. It simply existed, ancient and absolute. But standing there beneath those oaks, with hundreds of eyes boring into her back and the scent of pine thick in the cool September air, Alara learned that fate could be denied. Silas stood before her in ceremonial robes, his dark hair pulled back, his jaw set in a way that made her wolf whimper in confusion. The elder conducting the ceremony had barely finished the traditional words when Silas raised his hand, silencing the gathering with a gesture. His voice had been steady, devoid of emotion, as he spoke the words that would shatter her world. I, Silas Vane, King Alpha of the Northern Territories, reject you as my mate and queen. The bond between them, still new and fragile, screamed in protest. Pain unlike anything Alara had ever experienced lanced through her chest, stealing her breath. Around them, gasps rippled through the crowd. Rejection was rare, considered cruel and dangerous for both parties, but it was within an alpha's right. Alara had felt every eye on her, waiting for her to scream, to cry, to beg for an explanation. The daughter of Councilman Thorne would surely demand to know why. Why wasn't she good enough? Why did her common blood make her unworthy to stand beside a king? But something inside Alara, something she hadn't known existed until that moment, refused to break publicly. She lifted her chin, met Silas's stormy gaze with her own steady brown eyes, and felt her wolf settle into a dignified stillness. I accept, she whispered, loud enough for only him and the elder to hear. Then she turned and walked away from the ceremonial circle, her moonlight dress flowing behind her, her wildflowers abandoned on the ground. She didn't look back, not once. The crowd parted for her in stunned silence, and Alara Thorne disappeared into the forest that bordered Silverpine Valley, leaving behind the life she'd almost had. The cabin she retreated to sat on the very edge of Cedar Creek territory, a place her grandmother had left her when she'd passed 2 winters ago. It was small, rustic, with a stone fireplace and windows that overlooked a meadow that turned gold in the afternoon light. Alara had always loved this place for its solitude, but now it became her sanctuary. The moment she crossed the threshold and closed the door behind her, the fever began. Bond rejection was physically brutal. Her body, already trying to adjust to having a mate, now had to survive the severing of that connection. Alara collapsed onto the worn couch, her skin burning, her muscles aching as if she'd run for days without rest. Sweat soaked through her dress as chills racked her body. Her wolf howled internally, a mournful sound that echoed through her consciousness. For 3 days, Alara drifted in and out of fevered sleep, her grandmother's quilts wrapped around her trembling form. She didn't cry, not once. Instead, she made plans. Once the fever broke, once her body adjusted to being alone again, she would leave Cedar Creek. Maybe travel south to the coastal packs, or west to the mountain territories. Somewhere far from Silas Vane and the Northern Court, with their judgmental stares and their obsession with bloodlines and political alliances. Somewhere she could just be Alara, not the she-wolf who wasn't good enough for a king. On the third night, the fever finally broke. Alara woke to find moonlight streaming through her windows, her body weak, but no longer burning. She managed to drag herself to the bathroom, splash cold water on her face, and stare at her reflection in the mirror. She looked different somehow. Thinner, paler, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A hardness, a strength forged in the fire of public humiliation and private agony. She was heating water for tea when she heard it, the unmistakable rumble of powerful engines approaching, multiple vehicles. Alara's wolf stirred, recognition flooding through her before her mind could catch up. That scent carrying on the wind, sandalwood, pine, and something wild like a summer storm. Her hands trembled as she set down the kettle. It couldn't be. He wouldn't. But when Alara opened her cabin door, stepping out onto the small porch as the last rays of sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, she found 3 black SUVs parked in her meadow, and standing at the edge of her property line, as if waiting for permission to cross onto her land, was Silas Vane himself. He looked nothing like the composed king who had rejected her 3 days ago. Silas's dark hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His jaw was shadowed with stubble, and his clothes, usually impeccable, were rumpled. But it was his eyes that caught Alara's attention and held it. Those storm-gray eyes were wild, desperate, rimmed with shadows that spoke of sleepless nights. His wolf was right there, just beneath the surface, making his gaze almost glow in the fading light. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the meadow. Alara could feel her heart pounding, could smell the tension rolling off him in waves. Behind Silas, she could see other wolves in the vehicles. His elite guard, no doubt, but they remained inside, giving their king this moment. The evening air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the distant promise of rain. Alara. Her name on his lips was rough, almost pained. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if remembering himself. As if remembering that he had no right to cross onto her land uninvited. That small gesture of restraint, so unlike the commanding alpha she knew him to be, sent a flicker of something through her chest. Not the mate bond, which still ached like a healing wound, but something else. Curiosity, perhaps. "You shouldn't be here," Alara said, her voice steadier than she felt. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was wearing only an old sweater and leggings, her dark hair loose and tangled from days in bed. She must look a mess, while even disheveled. Silas carried himself with that innate authority that came from being born to rule. "I know." His response surprised her. Silas Vane didn't strike her as someone who admitted to being wrong about anything. He took another step forward, his hands flexing at his sides as if he wanted to reach for her, but was holding himself back. "I know I have no right, but I need you to come with me. Back to the palace." The audacity of it struck Alara like a physical blow. She actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made Silas flinch. "You need me to come with you? You rejected me in front of hundreds of witnesses. You called me unworthy to be your mate, your queen. And now, 3 days later, you show up at my door and expect me to just pack my things and follow you back like nothing happened? That's not what I said." Silas's voice dropped lower, that alpha command creeping into his tone. "I never called you unworthy. I said you weren't suitable for the position of queen. There's a difference." "Is there?" Alara stepped off her porch, anger giving her strength she didn't know she still possessed. "Because from where I was standing, being told I'm not suitable to stand beside you felt an awful lot like being told I'm not good enough. So please, enlighten me, Your Majesty. What's the difference?" Silas's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking there. For a moment, she thought he might turn and leave, retreat back to his palace and his perfect political strategies. But instead, he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, stopping just at the edge of what would be considered appropriate distance. This close, Alara could see the exhaustion written in every line of his face, could smell the desperation rolling off him. "The difference is that I was wrong," he said. And those words, coming from a king who'd built his reputation on never being wrong, hung in the air between them. "The difference is that I spent the last 3 days trying to convince myself I made the right choice for the kingdom. That choosing a mate based on political advantage rather than the bond was the logical thing to do. The difference is that I've barely slept, barely eaten, and my wolf has been raging inside me every second you've been gone." Alara wanted to feel vindicated, wanted to throw his pain back in his face the way he'd thrown hers away. But seeing him like this, vulnerable in a way she suspected few ever witnessed, made something in her chest tighten. "That's the bond," she said quietly. "It hurts when it's rejected. You'll adjust." "Will I?" Silas's hand lifted, hesitated, then fell back to his side. "Because it's been 72 hours. And instead of getting easier, it's gotten worse. Every hour that passes, my wolf becomes harder to control. The palace feels empty. Everything feels empty." Before Alara could respond, movement from the tree line caught her attention. 3 wolves emerged from the shadows, members of her old pack by their scent. They approached cautiously, their body language submissive but protective. Marcus, her childhood friend, shifted first, pulling on the pants he'd carried in his mouth. "Alara, is everything all right?" Marcus asked, his eyes darting between her and the King Alpha. We sensed tension. Silas's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His shoulders straightened, his eyes hardening as he turned to face the newcomers. The air around him seemed to thicken with authority, with power. "This is a private conversation," he said, his voice carrying that unmistakable alpha command that made Marcus and the others instinctively lower their gazes. "They're my friends," Alara interjected, stepping slightly between Silas and her packmates. "And this is my land. You're the one who doesn't belong here." That brought Silas's attention back to her, and for a moment, she saw something flash across his face. Hurt, maybe, or realization. He took a breath, visibly forcing himself to relax. "You're right. I apologize." He turned back to Marcus and the others. "I mean no disrespect to Cedar Creek Pack. I'm here only to speak with Alara." Marcus looked at her, a silent question in his eyes. "Are you safe? Do you want us to stay?" Alara gave him a small nod of reassurance. "It's okay, Marcus. Give us a few minutes." Reluctantly, Marcus and the others retreated back into the tree line, though Alara could sense them nearby, watchful. The gesture warmed something inside her, the knowledge that she wasn't completely alone, that her pack still cared. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Your support means everything. When they were alone again, Alara turned back to Silas. "What do you really want? And don't give me vague commands about packing my things. If you're here, if you drove all this way, then talk to me like I'm a person, not a subject." Silas ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of frustration so human it reminded Alara that beneath the crown and the power, he was just a man. "The council is pressuring me to choose another mate, someone from one of the established families. Lady Helena Blackwood has been suggested." The name hit Alara like cold water. Helena Blackwood, daughter of the Western Territory's most powerful family. Beautiful, accomplished, trained in politics and combat from childhood. Everything Alara wasn't. "Then choose her," Alara said, proud of how steady her voice remained. "Problem solved." "I can't." The words were torn from Silas, raw and honest. "I've tried. My wolf won't accept it. Won't accept anyone but you." The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall, soft drops that quickly intensified into a steady downpour. Alara stood in her meadow, rainwater soaking through her sweater, staring at the most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories, as he looked at her with something that might have been desperation. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the scene in stark flashes of white light. "Come inside," Alara heard herself say, though every logical part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. "Before we both catch pneumonia." Silas gestured to his guards, a subtle movement that sent them retreating to give their king privacy. Then, he followed Alara up the porch steps and into her small cabin. The space felt even smaller with him in it, his presence filling every corner. He stood dripping on her grandmother's handmade rug, looking entirely out of place among the simple furniture and homespun decorations. Alara grabbed towels from the bathroom, tossing one to Silas before drying her own hair. The domestic normalcy of the action felt surreal. 3 days ago, she'd been walking away from him at the altar. Now he was in her cabin, water dripping from his hair onto her floor, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he couldn't figure out how to ask. "Why did you accept it?" Silas asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "The rejection. Why didn't you fight me? Demand an explanation? Everyone expected you to cause a scene." Alara wrapped the towel around her shoulders, considering her answer carefully. "Because causing a scene would have changed nothing. You'd already made your decision. You'd weighed me against whatever you thought the kingdom needed and found me lacking. What was I supposed to do? Beg you to reconsider?" She shook her head. "I have more pride than that." "Pride," Silas repeated, something like admiration coloring his tone. "You walked away with more dignity than most alphas show in their entire lives. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Watching you just accept it. Not a tear, not a word of protest. What did you expect?" Alara moved to the fireplace, needing something to do with her hands. She began building a fire, stacking logs with practiced efficiency. "Did you want me to break down? Would that have made you feel better about your choice?" "No. Yes. I don't know." Silas slumped onto her couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The posture was so defeated, so unlike him, that Alara paused in her task. I thought I was making the right decision for the kingdom. The Northern Territories are still fragile, still healing from years of clan warfare. The council needed to see strength, stability, a queen who could command respect through lineage and power. And I'm just a common-born wolf from Cedar Creek, Alara finished for him, striking a match and lighting the kindling. I get it, Silas. I understood your reasoning even as it was destroying me. But you're not. Silas looked up, his eyes intense. That's what I've spent 3 days learning. You're not what I thought you were. Alara turned from the growing fire to face him. What are you talking about? Silas pulled a folder from inside his jacket, somehow kept dry despite the rain. He set it on her coffee table, his expression grave. After the ceremony, I couldn't let it go. Something about you felt different. More than just the mate bond. So I had my historians dig into your lineage. Deep. Alara's heart began to pound. My family tree isn't exactly exciting. My father's on the Cedar Creek Council. My mother runs the pack school. We're solid, boring, common wolves. Your mother's side, yes. But your father's lineage. Silas opened the folder, revealing documents that looked ancient, carefully preserved. Your grandmother, the one who left you this cabin. She wasn't originally from Cedar Creek. I know. She came from somewhere out west, married my grandfather when she was young. Alara moved closer despite herself, drawn by the papers spread across her table. She came from the Silver Falls pack. Silas's voice was quiet but firm. A pack that was completely destroyed 30 years ago in what was officially called a rogue attack. But these documents suggest otherwise. Silver Falls was one of the ancient bloodlines, Alara, direct descendants of the first wolves. The room seemed to tilt. Alara gripped the back of a chair for support. The first wolves were legend. The original werewolves from which all modern packs descended. Their bloodlines were supposed to have died out centuries ago. Their power diluted through countless generations of mixing with common wolves. That's impossible, Alara whispered. If my grandmother came from such a powerful bloodline, why was she living as a common wolf in Cedar Creek? Why didn't she ever say anything? Because Silver Falls wasn't destroyed by rogues. Silas stood, moving to stand beside her, his finger tracing one of the documents. They were massacred by rival packs who wanted to ensure no one from the ancient bloodlines could ever challenge their power. Your grandmother escaped, changed her name, and hid among the common packs to protect herself and her future children. Alara's mind raced. Her grandmother had always been different, she realized now. Stronger, faster, more intuitive than other wolves her age. Alara had attributed it to good genetics and an active lifestyle. But what if it was something more? Why didn't the bond tell you this? Mate bonds are supposed to recognize bloodline strength. The bond did tell me, Silas admitted, his voice rough with regret. I felt your power from the first moment our eyes met, but I ignored it. Convinced myself it was just the intensity of the mate pull, not an actual indication of your lineage. I let politics and council pressure override my own instincts. A knock on the door interrupted them. Alara opened it to find Marcus again, his expression worried. Alara, we've got a problem. Rogues have been spotted near the southern border, a lot of them. More than we've ever seen gathered in one place. Silas was at the door in an instant, his entire demeanor shifting from regretful suitor to commanding alpha. How many? At least 50, maybe more. They're organized, like they're waiting for something. Marcus's eyes darted to Alara. The pack is gathering at the main house. Alara, you should come. It's not safe here alone. She won't be alone, Silas said, his voice carrying absolute authority. I'm not leaving her. Alara felt torn between irritation at being talked about like she wasn't there, and a strange flutter of warmth at Silas's protective instinct. I can take care of myself, she said firmly. But Marcus is right. We should get to the pack house. She grabbed her jacket and turned to Silas. Your guards can follow if you insist on staying, but this is Cedar Creek business. Rogues gathering in these numbers isn't just Cedar Creek business, Silas countered. It's a threat to the entire Northern Territory. As if to prove his point, Alara's phone buzzed with a message from her father. Multiple border breaches reported across 3 packs. Emergency council meeting called. Stay safe. The situation was escalating fast. Alara looked between Marcus, waiting nervously by the door, and Silas, his protective instincts clearly warring with political necessity. Fine, she decided. We all go to Cedar Creek's pack house. But Silas, you're there as an ally, not as my mate. Understood. Something painful flickered across Silas's face at her words, but he nodded. Understood. The Cedar Creek pack house blazed with light against the stormy night, every window illuminated as wolves gathered inside. Alara could feel the tension in the air even before she stepped through the door, Silas and Marcus flanking her like mismatched bookends. The large meeting hall fell silent as they entered, dozens of eyes turning toward them with expressions ranging from surprise to outright shock at seeing the King Alpha in their modest territory. Alara's father, Councilman Thomas Thorne, stood at the front of the room near a large map of their territory. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled, his usually kind face tight with worry. When he saw Alara, relief flooded his expression, but it quickly shifted to confusion as his gaze landed on Silas. Your Majesty, Thomas said, recovering quickly and offering a respectful nod. We weren't expecting you. Circumstances have changed, Councilman, Silas replied with the diplomatic smoothness Alara recognized from formal functions. The rogue threat concerns all northern packs. I came to offer whatever assistance the Crown can provide. Thomas's eyes flicked to Alara, a silent question there, but he simply nodded and gestured to the map. Then you should see this. We've had 3 attempted border breaches in the last 2 hours. All repelled, but barely. The rogues are testing our defenses, looking for weak points. Alara moved closer to the map, her analytical mind already working through the pattern of attacks. The dots marking breach attempts formed a concerning arc along their southern and eastern borders. They're not random, she murmured, tracing the pattern with her finger. They're systematically probing, like they're searching for something specific. Silas moved to stand beside her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers as he studied the map. She's right. This is organized reconnaissance, not typical rogue behavior. Someone's commanding them. But who? Marcus asked from across the room. Rogues don't follow leaders. That's why they're rogues. Usually, Silas agreed. But there are exceptions. Powerful wolves who've been exiled or chosen to leave pack structure. If someone like that united the rogues... He trailed off, but the implication was clear and terrifying. A commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. 2 Cedar Creek warriors entered, supporting a third between them. The injured wolf was bleeding from multiple wounds, his clothes torn. Alara's mother, Catherine, who ran the pack's medical bay, rushed forward immediately. "What happened?" Thomas demanded. "We caught him trying to cross at the eastern checkpoint," one of the warriors reported. "He's not a rogue, though. He's from Silver Falls." The name hit Alara like a shockwave. Silver Falls, the pack her grandmother had escaped from 30 years ago. The pack that was supposed to be destroyed. Silence descended on the room as every eye turned to the injured wolf. Catherine had gotten him into a chair, already working on his wounds with the efficient competence of someone who'd been a healer for decades. "Silver Falls has been gone for 30 years, someone whispered from the crowd. The injured wolf's eyes snapped open, blazing with intensity despite his obvious pain. His gaze swept the room before landing on Alara with an impact she felt in her bones. "Not gone," he rasped. "Hidden. Waiting. And now they're coming for what was stolen." Alara's wolf stirred within her, recognizing something in this stranger. "What was stolen?" she asked, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. The wolf tried to sit up straighter, wincing. "The bloodline. The power. 30 years ago when they attacked, they didn't want to destroy us. They wanted to steal our Alpha's newborn daughter. But she escaped with her mother." His eyes, a startling silver color, locked on Alara's. "They've been searching ever since, and they finally found her." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Alara felt Silas tense beside her, felt the protective fury rolling off him in waves. "My grandmother," she whispered. "She wasn't just from Silver Falls. She was—" "The Alpha's mate," the stranger confirmed, "which makes you the rightful heir to the Silver Falls bloodline, the last living descendant of the first wolf's most powerful family." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, questions flying. Alara stood frozen, her world tilting on its axis for the second time that night. Suddenly, so many things made sense. Her grandmother's strength, the strange dreams Alara had sometimes, of running through forests she'd never seen, of voices calling her name in languages she didn't understand. Silas's hand found hers, his grip steady and grounding. She looked up at him, saw her own shock reflected in his stormy eyes. "You felt it," she accused softly, "when the bond first formed. You felt this power in me." "Yes," he admitted, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "And I was a fool to ignore it." Don't forget to leave a comment below telling us what your favorite part of the story has been so far. We love hearing from you, and your feedback helps us create better content. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thomas's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone, quiet." When silence fell again, he turned to the Silver Falls wolf. "You said they're coming. Who exactly?" "The Coalition." The wolf's voice was grim. "The same 3 packs that destroyed Silver Falls and have been hunting the bloodline ever since. They've united the rogues with promises of territory and power. They're using them as foot soldiers to find Alara and eliminate her before she can claim her birthright." "What birthright?" Alara demanded, her hand still clasped in Silas's. "I don't want anything from a pack that was destroyed before I was born." "It's not about what you want," the wolf said gently. "It's about what you are." The first wolf bloodlines carried abilities that have been lost to most modern packs. Enhanced healing, prophetic dreams, the ability to sense intentions and lies. Your grandmother suppressed these gifts to hide, but they're in you, dormant, and if awakened— He paused. "You would be the most powerful she-wolf in the Northern Territories." Silas's hand tightened on hers. That's why the bond felt so intense, he said, more to himself than anyone else. It wasn't just fate pairing us. It was power, recognizing power. But it doesn't matter, Ilara insisted, trying to pull her hand free. Silas held firm. I'm not interested in ancient powers or bloodline politics. I just want to live my life in peace. Peace isn't an option anymore, the Silver Falls wolf said sadly. The coalition knows where you are. They're coming, and they won't stop until the bloodline is ended permanently. Marcus stepped forward, his young face set with determination. Then we fight. Cedar Creek doesn't abandon its own. Cedar Creek can't stand against 3 packs and an army of rogues, Thomas said heavily, though pride shone in his eyes for his pack's loyalty. No, Silas agreed, but the Northern Territories can. He turned to face the room, every inch the king he was born to be. I'm calling a full territorial mobilization. Every pack, every ally. We end this coalition tonight. The next few hours blurred together in a flurry of activity. Silas's phone rang constantly as he coordinated with allied packs, calling in favors and invoking ancient treaties. Ilara watched him work, saw the brilliant strategist everyone spoke of, the leader who'd united the fractured North through a combination of strength and diplomacy. This was the wolf the council had wanted her to match, and for the first time, she understood the weight of that expectation. But as she watched him, she also saw the moments when his eyes would find her across the room, when his mask would slip, and she'd see the raw concern beneath. Not for his kingdom or his political position, but for her. The mate he'd rejected was now in danger, and every protective instinct he possessed was screaming at him to keep her safe. Catherine pulled Ilara aside, while Silas was deep in conversation with neighboring pack alphas. "Sweetheart," her mother said softly, brushing hair back from Ilara's face the way she had when Ilara was small. "Your grandmother made me promise never to tell you about Silver Falls. She wanted you to have a normal life, free from the burden of your bloodline." "Did you know?" Ilara asked. "About what I could be?" "I suspected. You were always different, stronger, more intuitive than other pups your age. But your grandmother worked hard to suppress it, to keep you hidden." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "She died protecting that secret. I think the stress of keeping it, of always looking over her shoulder, it wore her down." Ilara felt her own tears threaten. Her grandmother had been her hero, her confidant, her safe place. And all along, she'd been carrying this enormous secret, this burden. I wish she'd told me. She wanted to. Near the end, she kept saying she needed to prepare you, but she passed before she could. Catherine squeezed Ilara's hands. "But sweetheart, the power is yours whether you want it or not. And right now, our pack needs it. Those rogues out there, they're hunting you. We can run, scatter, try to hide you again. Or I can face it," Ilara finished. "Become what I was born to be. Only if you're ready. This isn't a burden you have to carry alone." Catherine glanced over at Silas. "And it seems you have someone willing to stand with you, if you'll let him." Ilara followed her mother's gaze. As if sensing her attention, Silas looked up from his phone call, his eyes meeting hers across the crowded room. The mate bond, even damaged, pulsed between them. She could feel his determination, his regret, his fierce need to protect her. The Silver Falls wolf, who'd introduced himself as Garrett, approached Ilara as midnight drew near. He moved better now, Catherine's healing having mended the worst of his injuries. The coalition will attack at dawn, he said quietly. They'll want to catch the pack sleeping, unprepared. But there's something you should know about your grandmother. Alara turned to him fully, noting the respect in his silver eyes. What? Before she escaped, before the attack, she was one of the strongest healers our pack had ever seen. Not just physical wounds, but emotional ones, spiritual ones. She could mend broken bonds. Garrett's gaze flicked meaningfully to Silas. That gift would have passed to you. Hope and fear warred in Alara's chest. Are you saying I could fix the rejection? Repair the mate bond? I'm saying you have abilities your grandmother never got to teach you. Whether you choose to use them, and how, that's up to you. Garrett squeezed her shoulder gently. But you should know that a fully bonded pair, especially one as powerful as you and the King Alpha, could turn the tide of any fight. Your combined strength would be formidable. As Garrett walked away, Alara stood in the center of the chaos, her mind whirling. Around her, Cedar Creek wolves prepared for battle alongside Silas's royal guard. Weapons were checked, strategies debated. But Alara found herself thinking not of the coming fight, but of the bond that still ached in her chest. Silas found her on the pack house porch as the first hints of pre-dawn light touched the eastern sky. He stood beside her in silence for a moment, both of them watching the forest beyond, waiting for the attack they knew was coming. I've been thinking about what you said, Alara began, her voice quiet. About your wolf not accepting anyone else. About the bond. Alara, Silas started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. You rejected me because you thought I wasn't strong enough. Wasn't suitable to be queen. You were wrong about my bloodline, but you weren't entirely wrong about me. She turned to face him. I wasn't ready to be queen. I'm still not really. But I'm ready to fight for my pack, for my people. I'm ready to become who I was meant to be. Silas's eyes searched her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that if we survive what's coming, if we make it through this dawn, then maybe we can talk about trying again. Not because of politics or bloodlines or what the council wants, but because maybe, just maybe, the bond knew what it was doing when it brought us together. Before Silas could respond, a howl split the air, then another, and another. The rogues were coming. The battle that followed would be spoken of for generations. The coalition forces crashed against the combined strength of the northern territories like a wave against stone. But Alara barely registered the chaos around her. Something was happening inside her. Something ancient and powerful awakening as adrenaline flooded her system. She felt it when her grandmother's gifts fully manifested, a rush of power that made her gasp. Suddenly, she could sense the intentions of every wolf on the battlefield, could feel the fear and desperation of the rogues being used as pawns. More than that, she could feel the mate bond, damaged but not broken, a golden thread connecting her to Silas. And she knew, with absolute certainty, what she needed to do. Alara found Silas in the thick of the fighting, his powerful wolf form defending a group of younger Cedar Creek warriors. She shifted, her own wolf larger and more powerful than it had ever been, and ran to his side. When their eyes met, she opened herself to the bond, reached for that golden thread, and began to heal it. The power that flooded through them both was staggering. Silas's wolf stumbled, then steadied as the bond snapped into place, stronger than before. Alara felt it too, the rightness of it, the way their strengths complemented each other perfectly. Together, they turned the tide. With Alara's gifts allowing them to predict enemy movements and Silas's strategic brilliance directing their forces, the coalition's attack crumbled. The rogues, realizing they'd been lied to and used, began to flee. By the time the sun fully rose over Cedar Creek territory, the battle was won. Alara shifted back to human form, exhausted but whole. Silas found her immediately, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that spoke of how close they'd come to losing everything. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "For everything. For being blind. For letting politics override what I knew in my heart. For rejecting the most precious gift fate ever gave me." Alara pulled back enough to look up at him, seeing the tears tracking down his face mixing with dirt and blood. "I'm sorry too," she said. "For walking away without a fight. For not standing up for what we could be together." "Can you forgive me?" Silas asked, his voice breaking. "Can we start over?" Alara felt the mate bond humming between them, fully healed and stronger than ever. She felt her grandmother's gifts settling into her soul, no longer dormant, but alive and ready. She thought of everything that had led to this moment: the public rejection, the 3 days of agony, the revelations about her bloodline, the battle they'd just survived together. "We can't start over," she said, watching panic flash across his face before she smiled. "Because I don't want to forget any of it. The pain made us stronger. The separation taught us what we have together. I don't want to start over, Silas. I want to move forward." Hope blazed in his eyes, brighter than the sunrise painting the sky behind them. "Together?" "Together," Alara confirmed. Then she pulled him down and kissed him, sealing the bond, accepting her mate, choosing her future. Around them, the survivors cheered. Cedar Creek wolves and Royal Guard alike celebrated not just the victory in battle, but the victory of love over pride, of destiny over politics. 3 months later, Alara Thorne stood once again beneath the ancient oaks of Silver Pine Valley, wearing a dress the color of moonlight and carrying wildflowers from the meadows she loved. But this time, when Silas Vane spoke the ceremonial words, they were words of acceptance, of love, of eternal commitment. "I, Silas Vane, accept you as my mate and queen, not because of your bloodline or your power, but because you are brave, compassionate, and strong in ways I never understood. You are my equal, my partner, and my heart." Alara spoke her own vows with tears streaming down her face. "I, Alara Thorne, accept you as my mate and king, not despite your flaws, but with them. Because you taught me that even the strongest can make mistakes, and true strength is found in admitting them and choosing to grow." This time, when they sealed their bond before the gathered packs, there was no doubt, no hesitation. Just 2 souls, once broken, now whole, stepping into a future they would build together. A future where bloodlines mattered less than character, where power was tempered with compassion, and where a common-born she-wolf and a king taught the North that love was the strongest force of all. As they turned to face their people, Alara's hand clasped firmly in Silas's, both of them smiling through happy tears. The ancient oaks seemed to whisper their approval, and the Northern Territories celebrated the beginning of a new era. An era that had started 3 days after she'd silently accepted rejection, when a king appeared at her door not to pick her up, but to ask her to choose him again. And she had. Thank you so much for watching this story until the very end. If you enjoyed this journey of love, redemption, and discovering true strength, Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. What was your favorite moment? The rejection scene, the battle, or the beautiful ending? Share your thoughts below. Until next time, remember that the strongest love stories are those that survive the hardest trials. Take care.